Hello and welcome to Your Neighborhood Show. I'm Carolyn, and the reason I started this podcast is because it actually comes from my own life's journey of growing up in Mumbai, India, in a very strong, connected neighborhood where pretty much everyone knew everyone. And then over my 22-year marriage, I inadvertently, here in Australia, I inadvertently got disconnected or isolated rather. And after my marriage breakdown, I was kind of reflecting on my life and wondering, how did I come from that strong community and connectedness, and now when I need support the most, I don't have it. And so I went on this journey of wanting to get myself supported again and build that network of support around me. And in the process of doing that, I realized that there were many others like myself, and it's everywhere. There's disconnection everywhere. And so what the podcast is about drawing out beautiful stories, amazing stories actually, of everyday amazing people from their lives at times when they felt connected as well as disconnected, and to normalize it. But then how do we then move from times when we are disconnected and feel supported again? I've been so lucky to meet some amazing people through this process, and what I've realized is when I'm intentional about getting to know somebody, I can get to know them in 3 to 4 hours. And that's been the biggest blessing for me. Today, our guest is the lovely Jack Terroni. And Jack is an amazing, from the little that I know of him, an amazing singer, composer, a producer, and a writer. And he has produced a musical called Punchy. Am I right?
That's
Punchy?
correct, yeah.
Yes. And recently, I actually met Jack at a Brisbane festival event a few months ago. And I think we started chatting and we found so much in common. I was starting a sentence and you were finishing it. And then anyway, we caught up once, and then I said, will you be on my podcast? Because I loved your story. And here you are. So welcome, Jack.
Oh, thank you very much, Carolyn. Thank you for having me.
So happy for you to be here.
Yes, delighted. Thank you so much. Yeah.
No, I remember meeting you at the Brisbane festival, that event, and we were chatting, and we found so much in common in terms of our spiritual journeys, and I'm a big follower of Marianne Williamson.
Yeah, that's what we connected over. I seem to remember.
Yes. So I've kind of heard a lot about your story from you, obviously, prior to you coming over here.
Yeah.
And there's so much to unpack. And we only have 40 minutes, sadly, but
we'll give it a crack.
We're going to try and get the real, the juicy bits out of it for you, for our audience. So if you could, let's start by maybe sharing, if you could share with us your early years. You grew up in England.
I did. I grew up in North London, yeah.
Yes. So if you can tell us a bit about your mum and dad,
Sure.
a bit of a background, your early years up to the age of about, say, 16,
Sure.
something like that.
My mum and dad actually grew up in Islington, which originally was quite a working class area in the UK. I think the UK still has this sort of class obsession, but it's only relevant in the sense that it was originally a very poor working class area, which then became gentrified over, series of decades. And so they were economic migrants that moved out into the suburbs and eventually ended up in a little place at the end of the Piccadilly line called Arnos Grove. My household was actually quite, because your purpose of this podcast today, we sort of want to touch on elements of when we are connected and when we are disconnected. Mm-hmm. And I'd say that, my family, I grew up in quite an anxious household.
Right.
For good reasons. My mum and dad both suffered a lot of trauma in their early life that is not really typical. You might have, some instances of people that that, may have some things that go wrong. My mum lost her brother when, from a tragic accident when he was only 27 and my mum was 13. My dad lost his mum when he was 19.
Wow.
So, I think that had a backdrop that we were all unconscious of growing up. But it was just a house full of love. But at the same time, there was perhaps that edge, a little sort of sword of Damocles hanging over us that, you know, yeah.
And how did that kind of play out when you say?
Well, I think, you know, I'm like an energy person, and I feel like you can, you know, like I say, it's sort of insidious in the sense that it is subconscious, and, you know, there's a sort of feeling of, like I say, nervousness in the house. And it wasn't really until I, you know, became a man and went out into the world, and, you know, you'd go into different, I've been fortunate enough to travel and live in different countries that people are not necessarily frightened or nervous in the same way. So, you know, but like I said, that's one element of disconnection, but I really must emphasize that, you know, it was a lot of love and a lot of fun as well. And so, you know, I think that was a really interesting mixture. They were both such incredibly hardworking people. My dad had 2 jobs, and you know, and my mum worked very hard as well. And yeah, I think, you know, they were part of that generation who had so little and then really moved up into the middle classes and, you know, got on in life. And, you know, in the sense, you know, we were the beneficiaries of that. So yeah, I think that was, you know, that's the sort of the context of family life.
Yes, and your dad, you were saying that your dad, he lost his mom at the age of 19.
Yeah.
And he was, how many siblings did he have? Because he was...
so my dad had his little sister, my auntie, and an older brother who actually was a concert pianist, quite renowned British pianist.
Right, so he was the oldest. Music. Was Dad the oldest in his family?
He was the middle child, yeah.
He was the middle child.
But interestingly, and I think that sort of formed part of the arc of his life, is that, you know, when those bereavements happened, and I only have one memory of my grandfather, and it's the memory that I'm sure he would love me to have, because I was only 3 when he passed away. And he was an eccentric character, so... he put a pencil through my ear, you know, sort of a little abstract magic trick that obviously blew my young mind.
Yeah.
But he was, again, an extraordinary creative man. He painted, he spoke lots of different languages, very gregarious character. I can't imagine, you know, the pain of the loss of his wife, you know, like when she's in her early 40s and... you know, with a condition that would have been, with modern medicine, you know, would have actually probably been treatable today. And so I know that he struggled with, you know, depression as you would expect thereafter. And really my dad found himself in this, you know, incredible position of, I'm going to step up here. I'm going to, you know, take on the family responsibilities.
To help your grandfather, to help his dad.
To help his dad, to help, you know, his siblings. Correct. And in all honesty, you know, shoulder quite a heavy burden. I think that, you know, it's so interesting, the journey that we've been on in terms of reconciling all of that, you know, sort of dynamics, is that, you know, I think he had the same expectations, and along comes, you know, myself, who I think... Do you not feel sometimes that it skips a generation? Because I feel more like my grandfather, you know?
Right.
Because, you know, he was, like I say...
As in playful.
Oh, playful. Yeah. You know, you couldn't miss him when he entered a room in terms of, you know, I remember he was on a bus once and he had chestnuts, you know, and had a bag of them in a brown paper bag, and, you know, like the bag splits open and he's... you know, on the bus, you know, but, you know, that was just the sort of, you know,
I can literally picture that. You did that very vividly.
Well, I could just so see it, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I say, he was very visionary, you know, like had paintings up in the centre of town.
Wow.
In London.
And so if your father took on this responsibility of being father at a young age.
Yeah.
And kind of a responsible role at the age of 19 to help with family and sisters and to support your dad.
Yeah.
And then I think you said to me about your relationship with your dad was. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, it's so funny because we're really close today.
Yeah.
And I just think that, I have total understanding, like I say, about to be a father myself.
Yeah.
And I just think that you've got to bear in mind that, there are 3 other siblings that I have. I mean, I always mention this when this happens, when I get on this subject, because my mum actually gave birth to 5 children. She lost a child.
Right.
So this is what I'm saying about, from my parents, they've experienced an extraordinary amount of grief. And so, yeah, like I say, all of these things color,
of course,
your experience when you're growing up. But sorry, I got sidetracked there.
No, there's no.
So
there's no.
Where
wrong.
was I?
We were talking about your relationship with your dad, and you were saying possibly you were trying to explain.
Yeah, so I feel like actually, when I reflect on it, with 3 other siblings.
Your 3 other siblings.
Yeah,
yes.
and all being older as well. I think by the time he got to me, like, I understand, like this man has like absolutely worked like so hard, his whole life. And, I just think that's, just what it is. And, I found a lot of peace with that in my own work and self-reflection that I've done over the years, And I'm just, and as I sit here today, I have absolutely nothing but gratitude for both of them,
It's so lovely when you can look at your life in retrospect and then appreciate even what you at that time thought was not quite good or right or whatever.
Yeah, and painful and disconnected. And, like you say, I think, a lot of men of that generation as well are not encouraged to share their feelings.
Yes.
And so, you also have to sort of put it down to a generational thing. Great that it's changed today and, still a long way to go.
Well, he took on the role of a father at 19, as you said. And so as a young teenager, and he's probably looking in your eyes and thinking he's a man now and he can deal with his life in a way. But then you said to me you used to go into the forest to kind of, I said, tell us, because that I love that story of what happened, the experience you had in the forest.
So when all of these dynamics are subconscious, the psyche doesn't have a way of processing it in the sense that, if we can't make meaning, we're meaning-making machines.
Yes.
And so, if you're encountering all of these, elements of suffering, but you're completely unconscious of them, then, what's interesting is that, so psyche and the Greek word for soul, so I feel like the soul steps in. And
psyche is the Greek word for soul.
I believe it's the Greek root of, the word soul. And so, it has its natural propensity to protect us. It's actually really beautiful. There's a loving energy that steps in. And so I went into the forest and I would take myself off and
so whereabouts was this in
just in parks in North London. And I remember inexplicably waking up one morning, deciding to do this, but also deciding that I would paint my face, like with sort of tribal symbols,
Right.
I mean, like, God, I don't know, 15, 16, but it's interesting because I really, I've read a lot of Jung on the collective unconscious, and, there are archetypal symbols and, there's a lot of humanity's consciousness stored, in a macro level. And I feel that, that impulse, I was tapping into that. And you've got to bear in mind that, I went to an ordinary comprehensive school in North London, and, it's still set out with, as much of education is today, Victorian, based on the Victorian system where we sit orderly behind, rows of benches.
Yes, we had that as well. Well, the British had a strong influence in India for 200 years. So our school was also like very
regimented. Yeah.
Correct.
And I mean, you'd wait for the bell and,
Correct.
this is all designed to make great factory workers. And we're still doing that today. And yet,
cookie cutting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you think to yourself, hang on, we're not, all the machines have taken over the factory and they're automated, but we're still producing, that type of education system. And so, I certainly didn't thrive in there, that's for sure. But why I was linking that to the forest is because I find it remarkable, because also what a British education system didn't teach was all the massacres of Aboriginal people, which, I've since learned, at a much later age than I should have. All the crimes of the British Empire and in the colonial past that it has. But so I had no knowledge of, like Native American cultures, really, not taught in any depth. Obviously like awareness, but not taught.
Yeah.
And like I said, same with Aboriginal culture. And yet here I am as a ordinary kid in North London, taking myself into a forest. Well, why am I doing that? Why have I...
how old were you?
Like I say, about 15, 16. And I think that, I think this is what the central issue of our society at the moment is that there is no rite of passage. And,
correct.
If you do have, and I use the word loosely, an absent father, because, I've explained the context, that's not the case. But what I'm saying is if you like in a broader societal sense, then you're going to have a lot of young boys without a model of integrated masculinity.
Correct.
And that's a problem. And I had to go on that whole rabbit hole trip of, feeling like a lost soul in that sense.
I can completely relate to that, Jack, because when my husband and I split, my youngest son was 7 and my older boy there's 9 years difference, 16 or 17.
Right.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself, how am I going to raise boys when I'm a woman? I can be a mother and I can be a role model for my daughter, but boys need men to become men.
Yeah.
And I had read all about it. I'd read that book by Stephen Badalf, Manhood.
Yeah.
And he talks a lot about rites of passage and stuff.
Yeah.
And I went on this journey of looking for mentors for my sons and trying to get them to join these.
Yeah.
There were lots of camps but they needed a father figure to go with them.
It's crucial.
Or a bigger brother or somebody that would go with them and take them on a 3-day camp for an initiate. I never managed to succeed.
Okay. Well, it's absolutely vital. And I've been very fortunate to have, as a result, many incredible male mentors, sort of Gandalf-esque figures, these
wow.
That have loomed large in my life and had an extraordinary influence. And I have to say that, had I not met Chris Parker, had I not met Richard Barrett, my life was heading in a very perilous direction,
Yes, but let's come back to the forest experience. So you said you went to so it was like your own kind of rite of passage for you.
I followed that impulse of the psyche, the soul to do that.
And what happened in the forest? Because
it's difficult.
It's kind of shaped your entire life.
It has,
isn't it?
and it's very difficult to explain from a material world perspective.
You do the best you can, and our audience will make of it whatever works for them. Because I think the more authentic we can be in our sharing, and however it was for you, whoever needs to pick that up will pick it up.
Yeah,
not everybody gets the same thing.
I'm not reticent to get out the box. I'm just trying to contextualize it. I think it can only be really explained as a mystical experience.
Yeah.
I had a kind of download of consciousness where I had full-blown arrangements for music and stories. And so basically a fable came through. So I had this story that I was writing, but I also had like just songs pouring out of me. And like I say, full blown orchestral arrangements. And I couldn't get it out quick enough. You know, it was writing itself.
So did you did record it? You came back
I did.
as in wrote down stuff?
Yeah. So I've had a home studio set up, and then when I left school at 16, which you can't do in Australia, but it worked out well for me because I sure wasn't sticking around. I went to one music college, which again, I just felt boxed in. Because after the sort of forest experience, I had this, more fluid connection to creativity that again didn't always suit the structure of formal education.
Did you tell anybody about your forest experience, Jack, at the time?
I did with this lecturer that that was a well-regarded record producer, and he'd guest lectured. Then he heard some of my songs, and he said, "Hey, this is Nick Rowley, by the way, so I'll always remember you and love you for this." He said, "You got to get out of here. This is not suiting you." As in the
university,
the rigor, the sort of, you know, like pathway
boxed
to
in.
doing a bachelor, and you know, all of that. And so he said, "I have a recording studio in Denmark. You know, would you like to come and learn how to produce records and stay with my family?" And it was just one of the most truly magical times in my life when I reflect back.
Tell us a bit about that. So how far is I'm terrible with geography. How far is
putting me on the spot
Denmark
there. I think it's a 2 or 3 hour flight from London.
So you used to fly?
Every week and stay with his family for 3 or 4 days and come back. And yeah, I mean, I literally had the, you know, A to Z of of production, and it was beautiful. I mean, it was just for any Danish listeners present, it was between Billund and Aarhus. There was a little small village, like thatched cottages, lakes. One of the lakes, I have a song that came to me after a walk around this lake, and the lake was called the God's River, and that's on the second musical that I'm developing at the moment. And to be able to go to, you know, like a log cabin and just sit at a piano and then come back in with his beautiful family, sit by the fire.
Oh my God, I'm picturing it in my head.
It was just the most enchanting time. I remember I was reading, I think the magazine still exists, but I can see myself sitting ensconced in this gorgeous, you know, bed, reading The Week magazine, sort of catching up on all the geopolitical stuff that's going on, and I mean, a cup of tea and pinching myself, you know, you know, what am I at that time? I'm like 20 or something, you know. It's just. And
did Nick have children?
He had a little girl, Emily. Yeah.
Okay.
And she was around. Yeah. You know, we'd have like all sorts of shenanigans, you know, fun in the forest.
So you were like almost like his adopted kind of son. In a way.
Nick said I was Emily, his daughter's godfather of soul.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. But how lucky that you, and I suppose I shouldn't say lucky because I don't believe luck as in luck, because things happen, you know, very synchronistically sometimes.
Yes.
And for him to have chanced upon you in your uni and then to welcome you into his home.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been a huge thing for you. It was like the start of like somebody, first of all, recognizing the talent in you and having that, you know, belief in you.
And that you're right. And it really did set it off for me. And then, you know, thereafter, I know, you know, we can touch on other, you know, aspects of my life, but I should say that, you know, Steve Brown.
Who's Steve Brown?
So Steve Brown was just an epic talent and incredible mentor in my life. He's a triple platinum record producer, had 2 musicals at the West End, just an amazing talent, but more importantly, just such a kind soul. And I recorded Punchy, the musical soundtrack, with him, and again, like vicariously, just soaking up, all of, the tricks of the trade that he knew so well, and so that was a wonderful collaboration.
How did you meet Steve Brown?
Steve Brown, I met. So I was a marketing manager at Casio Music in the music division, which is really, again, a strange story how I got there. And the artist manager and artist in his own right, Kwame Kwatan, of the awesome funk disco band in the kind of early 90s. I met him and he introduced me to Steve. And Kwame, hello Kwame.
Yeah, so I'm just, I remember you telling me that, so you met Steve Brown when you got that job at Casio.
Yeah, well, so, connecting the dots between Kwame and
Yeah, so we were at, I'm trying to make sure have a good sequence to how so we get your entire life, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And you're only 30, how much?
37, yes. Or 0, as I like to say.
Why 0?
Well, we only have one birth,
Right, yes.
And we are the eternal self.
Okay. Yes. So from Nick Rowley, was this Rowley? Rowley, yeah. Nick Rowley, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nick. Nick Rowley being your mentor in Denmark, and then you said you got a job in Casio. You were headhunted or something?
Well, actually, it's funny. I was in a music school and piano showroom, and that was about to go bust. And there was a gentleman who was a sales rep for the music instrument manufacturer, Roland. And he saw something in me, and I was in need. And also
you were in need.
Oh, I mean, because this shop was in the school, this music school was going out of business.
Right.
So I needed to find some work. And
he saw you were in need of work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was really hairy. And I was, by the way, very hairy at the time because I was in my full-blown hippie phase. I don't know if I've ever left it, to be honest.
I remember. No, your hair is shorter now, so it's half hippie.
It's half hippie. Yeah, I've dialed it back. I'm sort of a hybrid now.
I remember you telling me that you rocked up. You were a bit of a rebel, and you rocked up to work in dungarees or something, in white dungarees, because everybody had to wear suits.
Yeah, I had a chip on my shoulder then, because it's interesting, like the ego evolves. People think that it's just the soul that is on this evolutionary journey, but the ego, which is, attaching its identity all the time, that's also, moving through levels.
So what do you mean by the ego evolves?
So whatever we identify with, so say, like you said, for example, the outlaw and the rebel. Well, I mean, I think that's true, but what part of that?
Understand.
What part of that is my ego at the time, and what part of it is actually my sort of soul infused personality? It's like one of those. Yeah. But at the time, I'm staunch socialist. I wore political T-shirts in this multinational company. And I think I don't know, maybe they saw this sort of juice that I had that was different, and I certainly did flourish there, but that was because I bucked the trend, and I was trying to give them a sense of what it's like to be a songwriter and a musician on the street, and
so you were bringing a different dimension in.
I think so.
And you met your wife Georgina there, didn't you?
Yeah, and I think it's so funny because I believe that, as the story goes from other friends of ours, that she had probably a little bit of distaste for this guy because my wife is a prolific, very successful businesswoman, dressed immaculately,
impeccably,
impeccable, And here I am in dungarees, you know, because I didn't want to, you know, I was like, this corporate game is not who I am, right? And she, you know, so goodness knows what she thought. But over time, you know, she sat opposite me and we got to know each other. And I think actually, I mean, certainly can attest that those two polarities, we really, really do balance each other out. And it'd be doing her a disservice to say, you know, she's like very, like she's fantastic in terms of like the data analysis and, you know, very sort of logical in her approach.
Yeah.
You know, there is a creative aspect to her, but it's like, you know, in companies, funnily enough, you have a chief operating officer, and then often they play off a more sort of visionary entrepreneur.
Yeah, you gotta have that balance, right brain, left brain.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's always, I mean, I think they say opposites attract. So in a way,
I can attest to that.
You have to, one person's got to be on the ground, the other one can be dreaming.
Yeah. I mean, I'm off in the different stratosphere. Yeah. But you're like, obviously happy together because you're having a baby. Yeah.
So tell me, when is Georgina due?
June.
So what have you got? 6 months to go, 5 months to go.
Yeah.
Wow. And I loved the story that you shared about how you found out earlier than she knew even that she was pregnant.
Yeah.
And yes, so share that with us.
Yeah. So again, another strange occurrence. So I should say that Thomas Edison, obviously the inventor, he'd sit in his armchair and he'd hold like a glass of whiskey or what have you, and he'd have his afternoon nap, but he'd do it intentionally. So the glass was there for a reason. So the moment he started to nod off, he'd sleep, and then, you know, the glass would drop, and obviously it stirs him to that state between wakefulness, from slumber and wakefulness, that in-between state. I think it's the hypnagogic state. And
how long is that's like, would be a few seconds or something?
Yeah, I guess, you know, like I've had similar. I woke up one morning in that state and had a whole song at completely there. You know, it's called Tough Love, which is on the Punchy soundtrack. So yeah, it's a lovely mode of sort of the vowel lifts, and you're sort of in between worlds, you know, in between consciousness. And so the reason why I say that is I'm sitting in the bath, and we'd been trying for a little while for a child, and but yeah, like my arms are resting on the bathtub, and I'm really tired. It's been a long day, so I nod off, but my arms slip into the water.
So your arms are on either side of the bathtub, and
and so, you know, that stirs me to that in-between state.
As in you slip underwater.
My arms fall in, and it jolts me, and I'm in that in-between state, and the most vivid image of the child's conception appeared before my eyes. And
what did you do when you?
I was aghast. You know, it really, honestly, it was so visceral that I got out of the bath, dried myself, and I made a note of the date, because I knew it wasn't so much a
what date was it?
September 26th, when it was conceived. I knew it wasn't I think I've just had a vision. It was, she is absolutely pregnant. And fast forward 2 or 3 weeks.
This is this September just gone.
Yeah, just in September 2024. I didn't want to say anything because, you know, like.
Yeah, you don't want to build up our hopes or anything. Yeah.
Very sort of instinctual thing, but, you know, I didn't say anything. She comes to me and says, I've got some wonderful news. I'm pregnant. And I said, I know.
And she would have said, what? How do you know I'm pregnant?
And I said, I saw it, you know. And I feel that.
Is Georgina as believes in mystical experiences and stuff?
No, she has her own spirituality in that sense. She's a lot more grounded than I am.
Yeah.
That's for sure. But I think she has a beautiful philosophy that, there's a sort of almost current, which I intuit to feel is, what the Taoists would call the Tao, or, and really this current is guiding you where you're meant to be. And that, if anytime you resist against that current, you'll find yourself, in a choppier waters. But actually, if you just, relax, it's gonna
go with the flow of things.
There's nowhere you can be that isn't where you're meant to be, actually, as Lennon said,
Yes, and if things are happening effortlessly for you, you're on the right track. If you're fighting uphill battle all the time in your life, you're on the wrong track, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. I'm gonna try that. When you told me that story the other day, I thought to myself, but you said a cup of tea, and so I thought, no, I'm not gonna try that, because if a cup of tea, it falls down and it's hot, it's gonna burn me.
Yeah.
But I could try it with a glass of cold water and a plastic glass, so the glass doesn't break, and I'm gonna clean it up. But I'm going to try it.
You're going to give it a go with your afternoon nap. Yeah.
Yes. Just sit up, because I've got a lovely armchair on my back veranda, and I'll grab a glass and see whether I can come download some orchestra piece. No. but I've had a couple of really amazing experiences myself. So I totally get your experience, Jack, and it's so real. And I've not shared it with too many people, but I have shared it with you. So
thank you.
You kind of, when somebody's shared their mystical experiences, it kind of invites you to share yours, and you almost forget about it because you don't want to talk about it on a regular basis, because people will look at you and think you're slightly weird.
And that's that's fair enough. But I think it's like I always say, you can't get wet off the word water.
Say that again.
You can't get wet off the word water.
Right.
And I think, oftentimes people are looking at the textbook and the label to explain these things. And I don't claim to know anything in this regard. I don't know. Okay. All I'm saying is this is a lived in experience that I've had. And you don't have to believe anything I'm saying, because it doesn't matter to me whether you believe or not. Genuinely. This, and I'm saying I feel that when people are able to open themselves, into these spaces, interesting things happen if you wish to.
Yeah. And it's all a choice. We are human beings have that, the gift of choice. So,
but I think it's important that, because I feel with spirituality, a lot of people make it their whole personality and their identity, and spiritual ego is the worst of them all.
That's right. And it's pretty big out there now, because there's so much of, new age stuff going around that people they learn a little bit about this and a little bit about that, and they think they kind of enlightened human beings. There was this thing when I've read quite a few books where they said in India, when the sadhus, which is the hermits, they go off onto a mountaintop and they meditate for hours and days and whatever, and they reach enlightenment, as in a state of complete peace, I would imagine. I don't know what enlightenment is.
Yeah, let me know.
But my personal understanding of enlightenment would be, if you can be, like anybody can be peaceful up on a mountain alone with nobody pressing their buttons in the most peaceful place. I can be peaceful too.
So, sign me up now.
But exactly, but try and be in chaos and in family or whoever it is or people, wherever there are lots of human beings that are pressing all your buttons. And if you can be peaceful there, then you've kind of achieved enlightenment, at least that's how I think of it. So to work on your own shadow aspects and see how you can not get triggered easily by somebody else's behavior, words, whatever, so
it's important to keep it grounded. I mean, I'm a huge Arsenal fan. I go to in Australia they call it soccer, which is slightly irritating, but I used to go every week, and none of this stuff is, some sort of elevated, construct or, you know, this is visceral real life experience. You know, you don't have to wear sandals, own a yoga mat.
That's
you know,
right.
like it's just like, you know, this is life. You
Correct.
know?
I was lying down on this deck on a sunny, up in a place called Mumbai Valley actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember lying down and just sunbathing. I was just wearing regular clothes and I was, as you said, I was just dozing off. The sun was warm. I could feel the warmth of the sun on my body, on my face. And then I felt this clunk, 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 clunk. Almost like something fell into I can't even explain it.
Yeah.
And then I was also on a quest of understanding why am I here and what is the meaning of this life, and I'm still always in that questioning.
Yeah.
And I got a great understanding of just from that, and I've never felt more at peace with in that quest of where I was at that time. So
that's beautiful.
So and yet I can't explain that, but it was visceral. It was a visceral.
And you
experience.
can take that experience to the real world. And you're reminding me of a story that I heard. I can't remember the source, but apparently this guy went to meditate in the Himalayas and like spent literally like a decade there. And like you said, very easy. You know, like it sort of, you know, now I'm enlightened. And the monk said, "Okay, off to New York City, go and open a jeweler's."
Open a jeweler's?
Yeah. Like, and see if these spiritual principles and you can, and see if you can make $1 million using these spiritual principles and be in the world, you know? So
Jesus said, be in the world, but not of it.
Right.
Which is beautiful.
Yeah.
Because, you know,
and that's a wonderful teaching, and that's the thing. And I think a lot of there is very much a sort of shift going on at the moment. And like from my personal sort of perspective, which it can only ever be, but I feel like, you know, Buddha wasn't a Buddhist, and Muhammad wasn't a Muslim, and Jesus wasn't a Christian. You know, these were teachers,
prophets. I like to say,
teachers, prophets. Yeah.
Or rather, human beings like ourselves that were born into the world and were able to achieve a level of
consciousness.
Able to achieve a level of being which is completely and only love, so to speak. And so, and made it known to everybody else that it's possible as human beings that if we do enough of our own shadow work, we can achieve that state of being love and seeing ourselves as love and seeing everybody else as love. But you know. So that it's possible, basically, and so
I think
that's the aim of life is to just aspire to be that. It's a damn struggle, but
I know. Goodness me, let us know. Let us know how.
So tell me something. I remember you saying that you felt very much on purpose, and you know why you are here, Jack.
Yeah.
Why are you here?
Well, that's it. Yeah, actually, I'm not sure. The reason what I say is that I'm very sort of committed to like following the breadcrumbs of my soul, like being in tune with what we've been talking about. And so in that sense, you could say a purpose is revealed to us. And I feel that certainly shows up in the gifts that, you know, you almost can't lay claim to when you have songs fall out of the sky seemingly, you know. So from that point of view, it's really clear that my writing and the types of stories of sharing everyday wisdom, hopefully in a relatable way. Like, you know, I feel like, you know, I could say, yes, that's my purpose. But, you know, purpose is a loaded question as well, because I actually heard, funnily enough, another podcast recently with an author, Elizabeth Gilbert, and she was saying, you know, one day she was at, I think like Venice Beach or something, and this guy was at the top of a ladder, but it was really precarious. And because she had worked on a farm, I believe, growing up, she spotted it instantly. And he's at the top of that ladder, but he's completely oblivious that someone, because she felt compelled to stop, and she did. And so she held that ladder while he worked for, like, goodness knows, like, you know, an hour.
So this is a real story, real life, right?
Yeah. And you think, I know, like, if she, because no one else was paying any notice. So, you know, if she walks past that day, does that man have an accident? Maybe he falls to his death. Is that her purpose? You know,
in that moment, as she walks
what's our
past.
you know, so what is, you know, so in that
Yeah.
sense, you know, it's
Well,
you know, we're here for many reasons.
correct,
There's,
correct.
You know,
As in, you feel compelled to do something,
Yeah.
and you feel called. There's a pull for you to do something, which is what you're feeling with your music
Yes,
download and
definitely.
sharing
I would
it with
certainly
the
say
world.
that, yeah. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And I did listen to that link of yours,
The
the song, The Day.
The Day. Yeah.
And I would love you to share that. And if you feel up for
Yeah.
it, sing us a line or two. If you feel up to it.
Yeah, sure.
How did that come about, that song? Because that's one
I
of the...
feel like we've gone down quite mysterious pathways in this conversation, because that's so actually I mentioned him, you know, like so my late uncle Rayful Terroni, he had a real niche of recording British composers that were sort of, I think, really largely forgotten about, but that was his passion. And he was just the most remarkable person, practiced 6 hours a day.
Wow.
You know, I mean, just...
That's a love for it.
Just nothing that he couldn't play.
Yeah.
And I wrote a piece of piano music after spending an afternoon with him in this really lovely library of all his music and the CDs and his Steinway piano. It's just unbelievable. And basically it inspired me to write this piece of, you know, piano music. And so I played it to him, and about 2 years later, he had pancreatic cancer, and that was it, you know? And fast forward to the development of the Punchy, the musical, and I needed one more song in the character's arc to complete his transformation. And I sort of, you know, sometimes I'm quite intentional about that. Like I'll ask the higher force. And, you know, sometimes be careful what you wish for, because what I actually asked was, I need a song that sums up the pain and the suffering and honors it in some way. And that I had experienced, because, you know, obviously what you write is vicariously, you know, a projection of what you've experienced. And certainly Punchy as a character certainly reflects some aspects of my life. And I was in the shower, and if you ever need a reason why your best ideas come through in the shower.
Yes, for me, absolutely they do.
Well, it's sensory deprivation. So because you've got this sensory deprivation going on, again, we're talking about these in-between spaces where...
Yes.
You know,
oh, wow.
And so...
I get all my ideas in the shower, Jack.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
There you are.
I'm having like the water on your head.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, bang, I've literally got all my, whenever I've done a community project, the ideas have come in the shower, and I can remember them.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. And so I had...
So just to go back there, the sensory deprivations, just explain that to me again.
Because you've got, as I understand it, I mean, you know, you've got other stimuli going on, you know, like that's sort of maybe, I don't know, masking other perception, you know, that you have.
Right, yes.
Don't ask me, I'm not, you know, medical in that sense.
Your understanding of it.
But yeah, like I know that it's a sensory deprivation thing. And so this, I suddenly get the full piano music come back into my sort of senses, except all these lyrics are just coming through, but like they're aching, you know, like every word just ached. And I, by the way, I was in a very fulfilled period of my life, because I've got my investment to put on a musical, I'm creating. So I wasn't sad at all, but I woke up. That's the part that I'm missing. Before I got into the shower, I woke up randomly bawling my eyes out for no reason.
This is before you went into the shower.
And then I got into the shower, and I got into the shower because I thought, I've got to change. Why am I just crying for no reason? And so then I get into the shower and I'm just sobbing. And as I said, you know, these lyrics are just coming through with the melody. And this was a instrumental piece of piano music. I had no lyrics for it, no melody. And all of a sudden, it's like the experience sort of joined. And, you know, my mum's very open to these things. And I wanted to stop, honestly, in the throes of it, but it would not let me until I had finished this entire thing. And I phoned my mum up and she said, without me even telling her what had happened, she said, I've been thinking about Ray. And she said, I know what you're going to say. So,
wow.
You know, there was something
This is your
odd.
uncle?
Yeah, the concert pianist, yeah. There was something odd that day that happened, and the song is The Day, and it sums up and released a lot of the pain that I'd been through in my earlier life, you know.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
You want me to sing it, don't you?
I do want you to sing it.
I'll sing you the first,
as
a little
whatever
bit.
you feel comfortable.
Yeah,
and stop whenever you feel like.
Yeah. This bag of problems, this rigged deck of cards, this human body chose to wear the scars. This broken family still loving hard. One man's story, courageous till he fell apart.
Wow.
Thank you for saving my life tonight. I'm oh so glad you came. You gave me your remedies. You took away the pain. Yeah, that would do.
Wow. Wow. I'm tearing up listening to you. That's beautiful, Jack. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing.
No, thank you.
We weren't anticipating you singing a song.
No, well, you know what? If you enjoyed that, I would be remiss not to promote the soundtrack.
Oh, wow.
So
where are these available?
So if you visit jackterroni.com or Punchy.
Is that you on the cover?
Yeah, that's me on the cover.
A little more hippier than you are now.
Yeah, right. And you can go to punchythemusical.com and the merchandise store is there.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
No, thank you.
Thank you. And to move on to your next creative project, which you're in now. You're writing a book.
I am, yeah. So in a sense, I'm revisiting the fable that I mentioned earlier.
In the forest?
Yeah. It's called Cosmovision. And it's funny, Carolyn, because I, about 3 or 4 months ago, because I've been revisiting the recordings of the songs and, polishing them up. And I thought, right, it's time to revisit the story which accompanies, the music. And it was only like honestly, like a short fable, except now when I revisited it, it's like it's been waiting for its, or not, divine timing is how it feels to me. And I cannot stop the veracity that it's, coming out. And it wasn't part of my plans to be a published author, but that's what's happening right now in the sense that, I have it's certainly at novella length at the moment. And that's blown my mind that all these characters and the full sort of, cycle of it.
You're quite an amazing young man, Jack. I've not met anybody like you,
everybody I feel has a gift. And I think it's about unmasking.
Look, I'm sure I haven't met any, because I suppose I've only just started these very in-depth conversations with people.
Yeah.
And honestly, every person I meet has such a beautiful story. I was recently trying to, I asked somebody else whether there would be a podcast, and she said to me, my story is really boring. I don't have any, I've listened to a couple of your podcasts and they've got great stories, but mine is quite, regular. And I said, there's no such thing as a regular story. Every one of us has the most amazing parts of our lives that we don't even, you share your story with somebody. The problem is that we don't have the luxury of time to sit down and intentionally or have somebody listen, and because I'm doing this for this podcast, it's such a privilege. I get to listen to people's stories, but yours is extremely unique in terms of the mystical experiences. So thank you so much for sharing. Yeah.
No, thank you for having me.
And it takes courage to share them on a public,
Yeah, like there's things that, that you stay private, and, I've had a tendency to overshare in the past, but I feel, like at the same time, when we overcome and we're able to share that, we give permission to others and we liberate others.
Oh, absolutely. That's a quote from Marianne Williamson.
Aha. Okay. There you go. She must be on subconscious programming with me.
It's beautiful. Something about playing small. When you play small, you give up,
it's that quote from her, isn't it?
It's a beautiful quote.
Yeah,
I feel like I want to share it.
We should bring that up. Maybe we can put it on screen for people.
Anyway, I'll have to.
Yeah.
I can't
who are
remember.
you to not be?
Yes.
It's sort of got that
in
language.
In fact, who are you not to be?
Right.
You're a child of God.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah.
Playing small doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
I'd like to end by, if you can share with us, I know you have a very precious relationship and loving relationship with your mum. Is that correct?
Yeah, thank you so much for
if you can just honor her at the end of this, because I think
thank you so much for actually bringing that.
Because we haven't talked much about mum, and I know you're
thank you so much. You're being you. It's amazing. Like my mum. We're friends. Like we obviously you'll have that mother-son dynamic, but we are honestly like soulmate friendship. And she's certainly been the biggest influence, in my life. I can't really even find the words to describe it. It's just, and I don't think I can even attempt to really. All of those sort of really sort of magical occurrences, that's just seems to sort of be every other week with my mum, there'll be some form of synchronicity that occurs. And really, I think what my mum's, she's incredible when she's sat with the bereaved as a counsellor, in hospices. So, she's really given, that grief that she experienced in her early life. She's the experience of grieving, and she's had, far too much experience with that, but she's also transmuted that. And what she's been able to do with that is give a gift to people who have lost people. And she's able to sit in the most vulnerable and uncomfortable spaces and be a comfort and a real, tangible service to people. And so, like in that sense, that's a life of meaning. That's a life of meaning. And, all of the glitz that we are sold, the specious junk values of our culture, that is like a sugar hit. That's gone. But I know my mum's had a very meaningful life in service to other people. And so it's been a privilege to watch her be there, not just for her family, but for complete strangers in their hardest times,
I know that the best gift that you can give another human being is your complete deep listening presence to another human being. You're just holding space for somebody to speak, and almost like you're just there, and they can speak into that. They say the quality of the speaking is determined by the quality of the listening.
Oh, I haven't heard that. I love that.
And I often, when have done a few speaking gigs, and somebody comes up to me and says, "Oh, you spoke so well," I say, I spoke, but I spoke into a beautiful listening. That's why I was able to speak the way I spoke.
Oh,
if I could sense that there was even one person in the crowd or that was cynical, or the energy, you'd get that energy back. So they're equally important. The listening is, in fact, more important than the listening enables the speaking. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jack. It's been a beautiful conversation
Yeah,
today.
well, you've certainly held that space for me. And so I thank you for allowing me to share my story.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm looking forward to catching up again sometime.
Yes.
At the club.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.